welcome to Season 2 of Sk8 Through the Bible. If you missed Season 1, it was Sk8 Through the Bible in 60 minutes. It was the entire Bible from Genesis all the way to Revelation in 60 minutes or less. It was 6.5 episodes. It's on this channel. So if you missed it and you're watching this, you're already on that channel. So click down there in the bottom somewhere where it says where the channel is, and it'll show you it should be all in order. Episode 1 through episode 6.5. It's the entire Bible, Genesis to Revelation, and little 10-minute bite-sized nuggets. So now this is Season 2. We're going to do Sk8 Through the Bible XL. What's XL mean? That means extra long, extra large. I'm thinking there's a Roman numeral involved that you could ascribe to it, I suppose. But that's not what it means. It just means like bigger. So we're doing the entire Bible. We're not doing it in 60 minutes. We're doing the whole thing. We're still not going to do a line-by-line, verse-by-verse, chapter-by-chapter deal. It's going to be a lot quicker than that. If you want one of those, there's a whole bunch of them out there. That's not what this is. This is a quick explanation of it, but it's not line-by-line, verse-by-verse, because that gets boring and would take the rest of my life. So we're just going to hit the highlights. But we're going to do it a lot more detail than we did the last season. So we're going to start with Genesis. Genesis is a rock band from the 80s, headed up by their singer and drummer Phil Collins, who later on had a stellar solo career, did one of the most iconic rock songs of the era, In the Air Tonight. Starts out with a big drum solo. Yeah, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the first book of the Bible. And so in chapter 1 and 2, it talks about creation and the Trinity. So basically it talks about God made the heavens and the earth and the grass and the plants and the bugs and all the animals and all the creatures. So in verse 28 of Genesis, it says, after he's done making all the plants and the animals and the critters and everything else, it says, then God said, let us make man in our own image. A couple things I wanted to point out. If you're reading along at home, the word us and the word our are both capitalized, like proper nouns. It's not typically a word you would capitalize, except for in biblical writings when a word like that is capitalized, it denounces divinity, talking about like God. So God is saying, let us make man in our own image, in our likeness. Who's he talking to? If he's God and he's up there all by himself and he's making creation, who's he talking to? Well, I'll tell you who he's talking to. He's talking to Jesus. He can't be talking to Jesus, Russ. You're crazy, because Jesus wasn't born yet. Jesus wasn't born on the earth yet, but Jesus existed still. So allow me to point you to the Gospel of John. Chapter 1, verse 1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And everything that was created through him, and without him nothing that was created had been created. I believe I got that right. I might have mixed up a couple of words, but that's pretty much the gist of it. So what that means is everything that was created with Jesus, and then it's redundant, and then it says nothing that was created without him. So it's a redundant statement, but it's trying to make a point, like this is so important, I'm going to be repetitive here. And so, yeah, Jesus was there at creation. And who else was there? The Holy Spirit. We'll talk about the Holy Spirit later. But that's the first indication in the Bible of the Trinity, the triad head of God. That God isn't just by himself. He is three beings in one. That confuses a lot of people. If you think about water, you can drink it. You can wash your clothes with it. You can boil it, make coffee, cook your food in it. Or water freezes and becomes ice, and then it freezes food, preserves food, makes your water cold. It turns to snow. Messes up the roads if you're trying to drive in it. If you boil water, it turns to steam, and the steam rises. And in steam plants, they boil water to create steam to turn turbines to generate electricity. Water evaporates into the air and turns into clouds and then becomes rain and sleet and snow and the rest of it. All of those things, steam, ice, snow, liquid, they're all still water, just different forms of water. And that same water can be three things at once. So if that helps you understand the Trinity, God is the Father, the creator of all. God is also Jesus, the Son of God. God is also the Holy Spirit, the Comforter, the one that leads us and guides us and speaks to us. And so, anyway, I could do an entire hour on that. I'm not going to, so we're going to move along. And then after he finishes all that, then he makes man. He makes Adam. Adam's the first dude. Then he gives Adam a task to name all the animals. Adam does so. And then God looks down from heaven and says, yeah, everything that I made is good, but it is not good that man is alone. So I'm going to make him a helpmate. So puts Adam to sleep, rips out one of his ribs, fashions Eve out of it, and then wake back up, and there's Eve. And so God makes Eve, and then Adam wakes up, looks at Eve, and remember his job was to name all the creatures, and so he had to name Eve. So he named her woman, because he woke up, he saw this naked woman in front of him, and he said, "Whoa, man!" So that's why she's called woman. Okay, that's actually a joke. But anyway, so there's Eve, and God says to them, they're in the Garden of Eden. You may eat of any tree of this garden except that one. Do not eat of that tree. That's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so don't eat that one. And then, okay, gotcha, don't eat that tree. So then, Adam's off picking blueberries or whatever he's doing. And a serpent comes by and chats it up with Eve. Now, I mentioned this in the last season, whether or not I think this is a metaphor. It could be a metaphor because serpents, aka snakes, they don't talk. They don't have vocal cords. It's kind of physically impossible for them to form words in their mouths and to vocalize them. So it's possibly a metaphor, but maybe not. Maybe he really did talk. I wasn't there. So anyway, their temptation is the devil, who is the serpent, says to Eve, "Didn't God tell you that you could eat of any tree of this garden?" And she says, "No, we can't eat of that tree over there, the knowledge of good and evil. We can't eat it or even touch it, lest we die." Now, God never said you couldn't touch it. He just said you couldn't eat it. So right off the giddy up, Eve is misquoting God. But anyway, the devil's like, "Surely you won't die. You can go ahead and eat that. Look how delicious it is. Come on, you want to." And so she succumbs to this temptation, and she eats unsaid fruit. And then along comes Adam. He's getting back from the blueberry store or wherever he's doing. And she's like, "Hey, hubby, look at this delicious fruit I ate. It's so delicious, you should have some." So he takes a bite of it like an idiot, even though he knew he wasn't supposed to. And that was the first fall. Yeah, that's in chapter 3, the temptation and the fall. So then God shows up and says, "Where are you guys? Are you hiding from me?" They're trying to hide from God, right? And he finds them hiding, and he's like, "Where are you hiding? Who told you you were naked?" Because that's where they're hiding, because they were naked. Well, the reason they knew they were naked is they ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So now that they knew the difference between good and evil, then they knew they were naked, and then they felt shame. So God killed an animal, which was the first sacrifice for their sins, and then took that skin and made them garments with said skin. And then he booted them out of the garden. He's like, "Okay, that's it. You guys are out. You are out of here. Here's your punishment," among other things. "Eve, in pain shall you bear your children. You will have much anguish when you're giving birth to children." She hadn't had any children yet. And so that was her punishment. And so when those of you who are mothers that have given birth and experienced the most pain that any human being could possibly imagine, you can thank Eve for that. That was Eve's doing. And then Adam's punishment was, you will toil the ground all of your days, and there'll be weeds. You'll have to pull the weeds, and there'll be rocks and thistles and what have you. And it'll be difficult to grow things. You don't have to work and do all that stuff. And so that's why we have to pull weeds. That's why there's weeds and rocks and thistles and whatnot, because sin entered the world. So he boots them out of the garden, and then so they're run around, and he says, go forth and multiply, go have some kids. So they have some kids. A couple of the kids they have are Cain and Abel. And then so Cain and Abel bring and that's in chapter 4 and 5, Cain and Abel are bringing their offerings to God. And Abel is a shepherd, so he brings the firstborn of his livestock to God as an offering. Cain is a farmer, so he brings whatever crop that he was growing. I don't know if it was grain or fruit or whatever, but he brings his offering. For some reason, God accepts Abel's offering, but isn't really pleased with Cain's offering. I did a lot of reading on that. It's not exactly precise as to why God was not pleased. Could have been his attitude. It could have been that Abel brought his firstborn and the choicest of his flock, while maybe Cain just brought like some leftovers of, whatever wasn't the best. That could be. But in either case, God was pleased with Abel's offering, not pleased with Cain's offering. God told Cain that he wasn't really pleased with his offering, and that made him angry and jealous. And so what does he do? He goes and kills his brother Abel because he's jealous. And so after that happens, then God is like, well, what did you do? I can't believe you did that. And so he's so distraught, he's like, I'm going to run away and go live in the land of Nod, and somebody's going to kill me. And God says, no, I'll put a mark on you to make sure nobody kills you. So he does give him some redemption, but then Cain basically bails and goes and lives in the land of Nod and has a whole different other family. And so moving along from that, the rest of chapter 5 is a bunch of begats. This person begat that person, and yada, yada, yada down the road, and it gets a little repetitive and boring. If you want to do some research as to who is related to who, that's a good thing to read, but if that bores you like it does me, then you might want to skip past that part. So chapters 6 through 9 is where it gets exciting. It's Noah and the flood. So Noah was a righteous man who worshipped God, and at that point, Adam and Eve and their descendants had several generations of people, and it got to the point where everything was evil all the time. There was raping and killing and stealing and all kinds of debauchery going on, and God looked down and said, wow, this sucks. This is just madness. I can't believe all this horribleness is going on. These people are wicked. I'm going to smoke this place. I'm going to shake it up like an Etch-a-Sketch and start over. Except that guy Noah. Noah, hey, come here. I got to tell you something. So Noah, I want you to build this big old boat. And he gives him the diagram of a boat. It's not just a boat. It's a giant boat. It's the ark. The ark. And he builds this big giant boat. And so him and his family, when they're done, they get on the boat, and then God brings them 2 of every animal, and 2 of every animal gets on the boat. God shuts the door, floods the place out. 40 days and 40 nights it rains. I mentioned this in the last season about whether it was a local flood or a global flood. I believe it was a global flood. Some people think it might have just been a local flood. I don't know. I wasn't there. But I'm just going to go with it was a global flood. So it was a global flood, and every living thing on the planet died except for whatever was on that ark. And birds, because birds could just fly over the top of it, I suppose. But can they fly for 40 days? I don't know. Maybe they might have got tired. Maybe ducks would have been okay. Can float around on top of the water. So anyway, then the water subsides. Says that the ark lands on the top of Mount Ararat, which is in Turkey, and then they all get off the boat and they repopulate the earth. And so that's what chapter 6 through 9 are. Chapter 10 is more begats, I call them. This person begat that person begat that person. A lot of lineage of who had what as a kid. And then chapter 11 is the Tower of Babel. Now the Tower of Babel is really interesting. This has puzzled me for a long time. Here's the basic gist of it. It says that the folks were building a tower, and they were trying to build it so high up into the heavens, and that God came down and said, you can't build this tower up into the heavens, and had scattered them all over the world and confused their language so they couldn't understand each other. I believe that that is a metaphor. I believe that for a myriad of reasons. For one, the reason we have different languages is common sense. If you're born in one country, you speak that language. You're born in another country, you speak that language. So if you're born in Russia, you speak Russian. You're born in China, you speak Chinese. You're born in Great Britain, you speak English. You're born in America, you speak the American version of English, which is slightly different than Britain, as we all know. And as far as God being worried about them building a tower up into heaven, we've got satellites now. They didn't back then, but we have satellites orbiting the Earth. We have spacecraft on other planets. We've been to the moon, allegedly. We have other spacecraft that have left our own solar system and are out exploring. We've got the Hubble Space Telescope. We've got the James Webb Telescope. We're all over the solar system. We're all over the galaxy. So I don't think that God was worried about us making a tower that big. I believe it was a metaphor for God keeping their humility in check, because they were thinking that they were all that in a bag of chips. And look at us, we can build this big old tower, and we're high and mighty and all that. And I think it was God's way of just keeping them in check, saying, you're not all that high and mighty. I'm still God, and you're not. I think that's what that meant. Here's my clock gonging. I might edit that out later. So then that's the end of chapter 11. Well, no, it's not. So the rest of chapter 11 is some more begats. This person begat that person begat that person, and then goes into chapter 12 where it brings in some of the key players, Abram and Sarai. And we're going to talk about that in the next episode. All right, stay tuned.